I got the divorce papers by email while I was still in the desert. 13 years of marriage ended in a PDF attachment. My name's Nathan. I'm 42 years old, a staff sergeant with the 82nd Airborne. At the time, I'd been in Kandahar for 4 months. 4 months of heat that clung to your skin like regret. 4 months of dust, duty, and distance. And while I was out there trying to keep my head down and my brothers alive, Becky decided she was done waiting. The subject line read, "Let's be adults about this." There was no warmth in it, no trace of the woman I had once held through winters and watched laugh through summers. The message itself was barely 3 sentences long. She'd already filed the paperwork. She'd already emptied our joint account. She'd already moved her new boyfriend, Jeremy, into our house in Spokane. I read the email twice. Then I closed my laptop with a quiet click, careful not to make a sound. There's a kind of silence that sits in your chest heavier than gunfire. I walked to the communal showers, let the water hit me until it ran cold, and stood there long after I was clean, not even feeling the chill. Then I got dressed for my shift. Said nothing to anyone. That night, when the noise of the barracks softened into tired breathing and the hum of night settled in, I reopened my laptop. My reply was one word. Understood. No argument. No begging. No blame. Just a quiet kind of surrender. I hit send and sat there in the dark, letting the screen fade to black like the closing of a curtain. Wilson, my bunkmate, noticed something was off. "You good, man?" he asked, not looking up from his book. "Yeah," I said. "Just some news from home." That was all I gave him. That was all I had left to give. The next few weeks passed in a blur of patrols and long nights. I threw myself into the routine. I cleaned my gear twice as much. Volunteered for extra shifts. Ran longer. Slept less. There's a kind of pain you don't talk about. Because if you do, it might become real. And I wasn't ready for real. Not yet. But even in the desert, with mortar shells in the distance and sand creeping into your boots, the ache of home finds you. I'd lie awake sometimes, staring at the fabric roof of our tent, remembering the way Becky used to fold laundry while humming under her breath. How we'd dance in the kitchen on quiet Sunday mornings. The way she once looked at me like I was her whole world. Somewhere along the line, that gaze had shifted, and I hadn't noticed. One day a letter came, not from Becky, but from my sister, Emily. Inside was a photo of my dog, Murphy, running through the snow, and a note that simply said, "Still love you. Still proud. Come home safe." I stared at that photo for a long time. Something about Murphy's tongue hanging out, so oblivious to human heartbreak, made my chest crack open just a little. Maybe healing begins in moments like that. A small, unexpected kindness that reminds you you're still alive. I kept that picture in my breast pocket. When I finally returned to the States, I didn't go back to Spokane. There was nothing there for me anymore. I spent a few weeks with Emily and her kids. Her house was chaos in the best way, laughter, spilled cereal, bedtime stories, and it reminded me that not everything falls apart. Some things stay. I started therapy. Quietly, at first. I didn't want to be that guy. But I soon realized strength isn't in silence. It's in honesty. And honesty hurt. I wasn't enough, I told the therapist once. She looked at me gently and replied, "Or maybe, you were just enough for the right version of her. But people change." That sentence stayed with me. Months passed. I got reassigned to Fort Bragg. New people. New routines. I adopted another dog, didn't replace Murphy, just gave my heart a little more room. I even started writing again. Journaling turned into essays, and one day, I submitted something to a military blog. They published it. Then another one. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to rebuild. Sometimes, late at night, I still wonder how Becky's doing. I wonder if she's happy. I wonder if Jeremy makes her laugh, if he's kind to her. And I hope, in some quiet way, that she's found what she was looking for. But more than that, I hope I have. Because there's a strange beauty in losing everything. It forces you to ask, what do I really have left? And for me, the answer was myself. For the first time in years, I began choosing me. Heartbreak didn't end me. It stripped me down, yes. Shattered what I thought was permanent. But in its ruins, I found something I'd forgotten, resilience. A quiet, persistent hope. A man who could be whole, even after being broken. I don't wear a ring anymore. But I wear a different kind of badge now, one of growth, of strength, of survival. And maybe that's the truest kind of love, the one you learn to give yourself when all the others walk away. Marriage. Iraq. Twice. Afghanistan. Twice. Each time I came home, Becky seemed a little more distant, a little more restless, like she was playing a role she'd long outgrown. I can see it in the way her eyes drifted when I talked about the guys, the missions, or even the silence of desert nights. We'd sit across from each other at the dinner table, sharing a meal but not a moment. "I didn't sign up to be a military wife," she said once, after I mentioned re-upping for another 4 years. I remember the way her arms were folded across her chest, her eyes fixed on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. I'm tired of being alone all the time. And I understood that. I truly did. But the Army was the only place I'd ever felt like I truly belonged. Out there, I had a purpose. People depended on me. I was good at what I did. Back home, I often felt like a guest in my own life, like the real version of me lived somewhere between the flight line and the forward operating base. In 2019, things started to shift. At first, it was small, barely noticeable. Becky would get irritated when I called during her girls' nights. She started talking more and more about how her friend Melissa had divorced her husband and was finally living her best life. There were comments, casual, offhand, about how we didn't really have anything in common anymore. I suggested counseling. She said we were fine, just going through a phase. But then came the late nights at work, the weekends away with friends I'd never met, the new wardrobe, the gym membership she rarely used. I should have asked questions. I should have confronted her. But that's never been my way. My dad raised me to think before I speak, to be sure before I act. So, I watched. I listened. I waited. Because something in my gut told me a storm was coming. And in this life, especially in the military, you learn to trust your gut. 2 weeks after I got the divorce email, I was sitting in the mess hall, halfway through a tray of bland chicken and overcooked rice, when my phone buzzed. A notification from our bank app. Withdrawal, $88,500. I stared at the number for a long time before setting my fork down. I opened the app. Our joint account balance, $22.37. Our savings, the $47,000 we'd built over the years, was gone. Every cent transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Murphy, one of the younger guys in our unit, glanced over. Bad news. I locked my phone and forced a shrug. Nah, just some account stuff. That night, I waited until the call center line was quiet, then called the bank from the base phone hub. The woman on the other end confirmed it. Becky had been moving money for weeks. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The biggest transfers started the day after I deployed. I hung up and leaned against the wall in the empty hallway. I watched other soldiers laughing, calling their wives, their kids, their parents. Life was happening all around me, loud, ordinary, normal. And mine? Mine was quietly falling apart. That's when Wilson found me. "Alvarez said you looked like you'd seen a ghost at dinner," he said, walking up beside me. I hadn't planned on telling anyone. But Wilson wasn't just another guy in uniform. He once pulled me out of a bad situation in Kandahar. He'd earned my trust. My wife, I started, swallowing the words like glass. She emptied our accounts, moved her boyfriend into our house, sent me divorce papers while I was on patrol last week. Wilson didn't say the usual, "I'm sorry, or you'll find someone better." He just looked me in the eye and asked, "What's your plan?" "I'm not sure yet." He nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." That quiet loyalty meant more than he knew. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were tangled like wires in a storm. I opened my laptop and logged into our home security system, something Becky probably forgot I still had access to. The footage loaded. There was a strange truck in our driveway. A man I didn't recognize was walking our dog. He used my coffee mug. He wore my Seahawks sweatshirt, one Becky had given me years ago, right after my first deployment. And there was Becky, standing in the kitchen I had renovated with my own hands during my last leave, laughing. Something in me shifted in that moment. Not anger, not really. It was something colder, clearer, like fog lifting off a quiet battlefield. I closed the laptop, pulled out my phone, and started making a list. Call James, Army buddy turned lawyer. Check Virginia loan terms. Contact Master Sergeant about emergency leave. Review the refinance documents Becky mentioned last year. Secure access to pension accounts. I didn't feel sad anymore. I didn't even feel betrayed. I felt ready. That list became my anchor in the storm. Each task a step away from the wreckage and towards something I could control. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was rebuilding. Becky had taken what she could, but she didn't take me. The man who fought through 2 wars. The man who knew how to adapt, endure, survive. In the days that followed, I reached out to a few friends who had walked similar roads. Turns out, betrayal isn't rare. But healing? That takes courage. Quiet courage. The kind you can't fake. And I had it. Some nights, I still watch the security footage. Not out of obsession, but as a reminder. A reminder of what I was walking away from and what I was walking toward. Freedom. Peace. Self-respect. Feel angry, I felt focused like I was. Planning a mission, this wasn't about emotion now, this was about strategy. At 0500 before my shift started, I sent an email to James with the subject line "Need legal help, discreet and urgent." His reply came an hour later. Call me, secure line. Only when I hung up from that call, knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to threaten, I didn't even need to confront her. I just needed to wait and watch and let her own actions become the trap too. Months later, I was back on American soil. I didn't tell Becky I was coming home. Didn't call, didn't text, just checked into a motel in downtown, spoken under a different gnome, and contacted James. We met at a diner 10 miles outside of town. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth. "Feel like it too," I replied. James handed me a folder. Everything we discussed: the house deed, loan documents, bank statements, and this. He pulled out a separate paper. "Found something interesting when I was digging into your finances. It was a refinance application with my signature on it, except it wasn't my signature. Not quite. Someone had tried to copy it but missed details. The middle initial was wrong and the stroke pattern wasn't mine." "Becky did this?" I asked, though 11 already knew the answer. James nodded. 3 months ago, used the equity to pull out $330,000. Your signature is required for that since the VA loan is in your name. Only forge my signature, take out a loan against our house, then clear out our accounts and divorce me." I said. "Busy woman, it gets better." James said she listed her boyfriend as a co-applicant. Hune's got a record, 2 DUIs and a fraud charge from 2019. I took a deep breath. "What are my options?" "Several," James said, "but first you need to decide what you want." I thought about it. "I want what's legally mine, and I want her to understand consequences." James smiled. "Then here's what we do." The next day, I drove past our house. Her boyfriend's truck was gone, but Becky's car was in the driveway. I parked down the street and watched for a while. Thought about knocking on the door, confronting her, but that wasn't the plan. Instead, I drove to the bank, met with the loan officer who had processed the refinance, showed him my military ID, showed him the real signature on my driver's license, showed him the forged documents. His face went pale. "I'll need to report this immediately." "I understand," I said. "I've already filed a police report." That night, I got a text from Becky. "Who have you been talking to at the bank?" Jeremy said. Someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office, filed paperwork contesting the refinance due to fraud, registered formal notice that no changes to the property could be made without my presence. 2 days later, Becky called. I let it go to voicemail. "Nathan, we need to talk." The bank called about the house. "What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults." Like adults, the same words from her email. I still didn't respond. James called that afternoon. "They froze the refinance money, and there's more. Your wife's boyfriend has been driving your truck, right? The one in your name. Yet he got pulled over this morning driving on a suspended license. From those DUIs, they impounded the vehicle." "Good," I said. "He also had some." That night, I sat in my motel room, the walls stale and yellowed with time, the hum of the old air conditioner barely cutting the summer heat. A single lamp lit the room. I held a beer I hadn't touched in 20 minutes. My hands were still. Everything I had known was unraveling. Becky, the house, my accounts. But now it wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. It was theft. It was something colder, more deliberate. I couldn't tell anymore if Becky had fallen into a trap or if she'd helped build it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Becky. "Nathan, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud and Jeremy got arrested for driving your truck. I don't understand what's happening. Please." I stared at the screen. I thought of the man in the kitchen, using my mug, wearing my clothes. I thought of the security footage, the empty accounts, the name Daniel Spencer flashing on the screen at the bank. And I thought of the time I came home from Afghanistan and found a sign in the yard that said, "Welcome home, Sarge," painted by Becky's own hand. The way she used to wait up for me. The way we once danced in the kitchen barefoot to a scratched-up Sam Cooke record. I didn't know who she was anymore. Maybe I never really did. But I knew one thing. I wasn't calling her. Not now. The next day, I met with James again, this time in person. He flew in from Colorado to help me sort through the mess. He brought a thick file folder with him. Labeled tabs. Highlighted sections. Real estate transactions. Emails between Jeremy and Spencer. Even social media screenshots. Becky's name was on 2 housing interest forms. She'd been in contact with Spencer herself. She might have been deeper in this than we thought, James said carefully. This wasn't spontaneous. This was months in the making. I didn't answer right away. I was staring out the window of the diner where we were sitting, watching a young couple across the street load a baby stroller into the trunk of their car. They laughed about something. Real laughter. Unaware. Unbroken. I gave her everything, I said finally. Not just the money. Not just the house. I gave her 13 years. The best years I had. And while I was out there keeping the pieces together for strangers, she was back here, breaking everything apart. James didn't say anything. He just slid another document across the table. This is the official fraud complaint. The FBI wants a full statement. They're taking this seriously. I nodded. Good. They should. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. I moved out of the motel and into a short-term rental. James helped me start the paperwork to reclaim the house. VA fraud protections kicked in. Slowly, one piece at a time, I started pulling back what had been taken from me. But not all of it could be reclaimed. Not the trust. Not the years. One morning, I found my old deployment duffel tucked away in the rental's closet. I unzipped it, and the smell of canvas and sand hit me like a memory. Inside was a photo. Becky and me in Colorado Springs. Her head on my shoulder. My arm around her like I could protect her from the whole world. I sat down on the bed and looked at it for a long time. And then, I tucked it away. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. An actual letter. It was from Becky. She apologized. Not just for the money. Or the house. Or the lies. She apologized for giving up. For changing. For not being strong enough to love the man I had become. I don't know when I lost sight of who we were, she wrote. But I hope you find someone who sees your heart for what it is. Loyal, steady, and full of grace. I couldn't carry that. But someone else will. I folded the letter slowly and placed it in a drawer. I wasn't sure what I felt. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe closure. A month later, I stood in the empty living room of my house again. The walls still carried echoes. The memories didn't leave, but they didn't crush me anymore. Wilson called from base. How's civilian life treating you? I chuckled. Quieter. You going back in? Not this time, I said. This time I'm building something right here. He paused. You always were good at rebuilding. These days, I walk my dog in the early mornings. The same dog that once followed Jeremy around the yard now stays close to me, like she knows something shifted. I've started volunteering at a veteran support center, telling my story, listening to theirs. It's strange how healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments, in good coffee, in a kind conversation, in a sunrise you finally stop to watch. Becky and I haven't spoken since that letter. I don't know where she is now. I don't know what part of our marriage was real and what was shadow. But I don't carry anger anymore. What I carry now is clarity. And it's heavy, yes, but it's also mine. Everybody's happy, Spencer said. I sat in James's car, gripping my phone tight, watching through the live feed as they carved up the life I'd built like it was just another deal. Another number on a ledger. Jeremy paced the living room like he owned it, pointing out the ceiling fans I'd installed myself, the trim I'd refinished over a long 4th of July weekend when Becky said she wanted the place to feel more like home. I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. She never even mentioned listing it, I said quietly. Not once. Not a conversation. Nothing. James shook his head slowly. Because it was never about partnership. Not to them. This whole thing was business. You were just an obstacle they needed to move. That hit hard, but it rang true. I watched for another minute as Jeremy and Spencer toured my home like strangers walking through a museum of someone else's memories. When they finally left, James turned to me. You okay? I didn't answer at first. Then I said, I will be. Not today, but I will be. The next few days moved fast. The FBI requested the video footage and moved forward with subpoenas. The cloud storage records, the forged refinance documents, the text messages between Jeremy and Spencer, it was all building towards something. They believed I had the potential to be the linchpin in their case. A clear victim with military status, across state lines, with documented financial fraud, identity forgery, and conspiracy. They were calling it a targeted exploitation scheme of deployed military personnel. A mouthful, but it meant something. It meant this wasn't just me. It meant there were others, other soldiers like me, betrayed not just by war, but by the people they trusted most back home. For the first time since all this began, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a witness. A voice. And maybe, just maybe, a warning. A week after the surveillance footage, Becky texted again. I know you were at the house. I know you're watching. Please, let's just talk. I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to the agents. Agent Patel called me the next morning. You're doing the right thing, Sergeant, she said. Every piece of evidence helps. Every silence, too. And I realized then, my silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was power. Weeks passed. Charges were filed against Spencer and Jeremy. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. Identity theft. Becky was named in the investigation but wasn't arrested, yet. The agents told me they were still assessing her level of involvement. Complicity isn't always easy to prove, Patel said. But we're not done. I thought a lot about what that meant. About Becky's role. About whether she was groomed by Jeremy or complicit from the start. Some days, I hated her. Other days, I pitied her. But most days, I just let it be. Letting go isn't one decision. It's 1,000 tiny ones, every day, sometimes every hour. You don't wake up one morning and stop loving someone. You just stop letting that love destroy you. I didn't re-enlist. After everything, I needed to stay still for a while. Find my footing on solid ground. I started volunteering at the local vet center. Got certified as a trauma counselor. I found strength in other people's stories, not because they mirrored mine, but because they reminded me that survival looks different on everyone. I moved back into the house after the court officially restored the title to me. Becky had moved out months before the FBI raid. I don't know where she went. Maybe that was mercy, not knowing. Some truths aren't meant to be carried forever. I repainted the living room, took down the curtains she'd picked out, ripped up the old carpet and put in hardwood I'd always wanted, but we never had the budget for, though now I knew where the budget had gone. One afternoon, I opened a dusty box in the garage. Inside were framed photos. One of them from our wedding day. Becky was smiling, young, radiant. And me, I looked certain. I held it for a long time before setting it face down in the donation pile. Some things you carry forward. Others, you leave behind. Last month, I was invited to speak at a military support conference, a panel on betrayal, fraud, and resilience. It wasn't easy. My voice cracked when I started. But I told my story. Every word. When I finished, a young Marine in the back stood up. His wife had just left him. Took their kid. He hadn't spoken to anyone about it before that day. He walked up to me after. Hearing you, he said, made me feel like maybe I'm not broken. Just bruised. I clapped him on the shoulder. You're not broken, I told him. You're still standing. That's enough. And I meant it for him. And for me. Life isn't what I thought it would be at 42. But it's mine again. And every step forward, even the hard ones, are steps toward peace. I still walk the dog every morning. Same leash. Same route. But something's different. I'm not looking over my shoulder anymore. I'm looking ahead. Last I heard, Becky had moved back to her hometown in Oregon, working at another dental office, starting over, I guess. I didn't hate her anymore. Didn't much feel anything about her, to be honest. She'd made her choices, and so had I. The past has a way of softening over time, not erasing what happened, but dulling the edges so you can carry it without bleeding every time you touch it. One evening, I got a letter from a woman in Fort Worth. Her husband was in the Navy, deployed when Jeremy and Spencer tried to run the same scheme on her that they ran on me. The FBI had passed along my name as someone who'd helped expose it. Her handwriting was careful, like she'd taken her time. You don't know me, but you saved our home. Thank you for fighting back when it would have been easier to just walk away. I read it twice. Then a third time. Finally, I pinned it to my refrigerator. Some days, when the silence in the cabin got too loud or the memories pressed in too close, I'd look at that letter and remember that something good had come from all of it. That maybe I hadn't just survived, but mattered. Jeremy was still in prison last I heard. Spencer, too. The system actually worked for once. Not quickly. Not perfectly. But it worked. And sometimes that's all we can ask for in this world. As for me, I was still finding my way. One quiet day at a time. There's a rhythm to healing. It's not a song you dance to. More like a slow march. Step by step, breath by breath, you move forward even when it still hurts. You learn to trust your feet again. In the mornings, I'd wake up early, make coffee, and walk Scout down by the creek that runs behind the cabin. The light would catch the water just right, and for a moment, everything would feel still. Uncomplicated. Honest. I started doing small woodworking projects for folks in town. A porch bench here, a bookshelf there. I even built a rocking chair for the librarian who reminded me of my grandmother. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Built with hands that had seen war, betrayal, and loss, but still chose to build instead of destroy. And maybe that's what this whole journey has been about. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Just choosing, again and again, not to give up on hope. On people. On myself. One evening, Wilson came up for the weekend. We sat on the porch drinking cold beers, watching the stars come out, both of us quiet in that way soldiers get when the world finally slows down. He looked over and said, "You ever think this is where you'd end up?" I shook my head. No, but I think it's where I needed to. He nodded like he understood. Because he did. There's a freedom that comes with letting go, not forgetting, but releasing the weight of what you can't change. I'll never get back the years I lost, the home that was never really mine, the love that drifted into something else. But I found something else on the other side. Something steadier. Simpler. Truer. I don't know what the future holds. I don't pretend to. But I know this much. The past didn't break me. It refined me. And here, in this quiet place with the wind through the trees and the creek running like a whisper through the hills, I've finally built a life no one can take from me. Something real. Something lasting. Something that's just mine. And for the first time in a long time. That's enough.